In the late 1970s, Iranian-U.S. diplomatic tensions increased as the Shah of Iran, who had been recently overthrown by the Iranian Revolution, was allowed into the U.S. for medical treatment. Iranians wanted him returned for a war crimes trial. They saw U.S. support of the Shah as complicity in his atrocities against the Iranian people. On November 4, 1979, Iranian students stormed the U.S. Embassy and took 66 hostages. 13, women, minorities, and non-U.S. citizens, were released a short while later, but 52 hostages remained for 444 days. Jimmy Carter tried to pressure Iran through economic sanctions, but only worsened the energy crisis. His failure to resolve the hostage crisis increased his unpopularity. 5 months after the start of the crisis, a failed rescue attempt resulted in 9 deaths. With the impetus of the former Shah dying and Iraq invading Iran, the Iranian government opened negotiations, and the hostages were released on January 20, 1981.
Reza Shah's transportation into the United States for cancer treatment directly caused the Iranian hostage crisis and the ensuing gas shortage of 1979. Bob Irwin, Auto Week, May 14, 1979. One motorist pulled a gun on another in an argument over who was next in line for gasoline at a Reno, Nevada service station. The attendant at another Reno area service station was slugged when he tried to stop a motorist from filling a can with gasoline. The current problems began with the Iranian Revolution, which reduced American oil supplies. Iran is back in production, but supplies are still short and will remain so, the government says. This shows that the Iranian hostage crisis directly caused the gas shortage in the United States in 1979.
When you guys were talking to me about it, the first thing that came to mind was all the yellow ribbons around all the trees in Hamilton. I grew up in Hamilton, and it's so funny. I brought this up with my friends who are my age, and they started arguing with me about weren't the yellow ribbons for something else, and I said, no, you're totally talking about the wrong thing. And so that was a vivid memory of just driving around the township and seeing how many people put ribbons around trees all over.
And they were just like in support.
In support because the hostages were there for so long. I was in high school, and what's interesting is I was in dance class, and my dance teacher actually created a finale in which we did a salute to the hostages, and at one point she had us going like this across the stage, which was supposed to be an obscene gesture to Iran. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was she was awesome. Yeah. I think the biggest thing we thought was why can't we get them home? How horrible it must feel to know that you're not with your loved ones, to know that they were suffering. You know what I mean? Everybody wondered what was happening to them, and it seemed like every day they weren't coming home again, and it just went on for so long. I remember the ribbons being tattered. Because they were up for so long, they started to tatter everywhere that they were. So I think that was it was emotionally draining on the country because of it just took so long, and then the whole gas situation.
And how much media coverage, how much information was coming out?
I think I never understood why they were there compared to when I told you I watched Argo,
Right.
and that. It was more about the fact that they were still there. Of course, they were picking on Jimmy Carter. That's another thing about Jimmy Carter, was a peanut farmer. So it would be like the peanut farmer can't get the hostages home. And the whole gas thing, was the gas situation still occurring? Did the government still have us under this crisis? Because I remember vividly going to a gas station with my dad with his car when he could go, and then going to the gas station on the days my mom could go because you had to go on odd and even days. So that was a big story in the media, was constantly, it's an odd day, and the gas, whatever they want to call it, like siphoning, and all of that was a big deal. People stealing gas out of people's cars. Yeah. Well, I was only in 9th and 10th grade, and we weren't anything like you kids now, where you were actually clued in. I just remember people saying he was inadequate, that he was the peanut farmer. And I'm sure I felt that he had to get the people home, but I don't think I was, in my mind, was overly critical of him. I think it was, we all felt it was a bad situation. But a lot of people were critical of him. Yes, so people really felt sorry for all of the Olympic athletes who had practiced and sacrificed their whole lives, and all these. We would wait for the stories to come out. Can this person compete? 4 years from now, you know what I mean? Like the glimmer of hope everyone was holding on to is that sooner or later they would be able to compete in another Olympics. But that was another tug at the heartstrings that. All these kids' dreams were crushed.
So you've told us that you've watched Argo. So do you think it was an accurate depiction?
Oh my God, it was amazing. I don't know if, I think anybody who hasn't seen it, it's just a great movie to watch. It's so well done, and it teaches you a lot about our government and what happened. But it explained a lot. It filled in a lot of the gaps of a childhood memory I have. So I thought it was amazing, an amazing movie, and just for me to go back to that moment and put it all together and finally have the big picture was cool. It was an impossible situation. Everybody now who wants to pick on Jimmy Carter about it was a horrible situation. It's like we can't figure out what to do in the Middle East now. So of course he could have done no better then than now, because nobody can fix the situation currently. 10 years, is it like 10, 12, 15 years later since we went over there for whatever other desert storm or whatever, all of that. So yeah, it was an impossible situation for him. And it's so interesting that he's tainted with that, but he did no more, no less than anybody else would have in his position.
Do you think this like affected? Like, do you think this is a big thing during the decade? Does it like kind of?
Right. It was 1979, so I remember it happening as I continued into high school. So that's why I can remember it, is because what's interesting, I think I told you, is that I said to my husband when he was watching Argo, he just kept saying to me, "What is this about? What is this about?" And I said, "Don't you know? Don't you remember that this happened?" And he said, "No." And he's 3 years younger, and he has no memory of the whole thing happening. So again, it's sort of that blip on our screen, unfortunately, that there's always bigger, better, worse things going on. And I think when we discussed this, we talked about the fact that people were held hostage for 444 days, which is a year and almost a third. That's a long time to be held hostage. I don't know how often we can say an American or a large group of Americans have been held hostage that long. So,
in short, the hostage situation in Iran affected Americans at home in many ways. It also caused the gas shortage and ruined Jimmy Carter's bid for re-election. I feel inspired by how much support there was for the hostages. The whole nation got involved in expressing sympathy for their fellow Americans. This really united the nation, even though it seems it was emotionally draining. Interviewing Mrs. Leonard and watching Argo tell what it was really like to be a hostage and live through that period of time to the younger generation who doesn't really know about the crisis. There were definitely domestic effects also. There were the gas crisis, the Olympics boycott, and the public consciousness that the hostages were not home yet. However, it doesn't seem like many Americans were aware of the politics beyond the outrage of Americans being held hostage. To talk about the Iranian students' protest against American amnesty for the Shah and original coup of the democracy in Iran would probably be unpopular. I feel a bit disappointed that the issue wasn't really addressed, but I guess foreign policy issue was not and never will be completely transparent. On a separate level, I think it is really interesting how history looks so different when you're actually living through it and when you're looking back on it. And it seems the Iranian hostage crisis had been much forgotten until Argo came out.